First day of our conference, and I'm very happy and honored to introduce to you the first keynote speaker, Dr. Charalambos from the University of Cyprus. Dr. Charalambos is at that university a lecturer in educational research with an, in my opinion, interesting research focus on the quality of instruction and the factors contributing to that instructional quality. For instance, by focusing and by researching curriculum materials or personal resources of teachers. Dr. Charalambous is not only a researcher, he's also a teacher, and he is currently working with pre-service and in-service teachers in a lot of projects. So, crossing boundaries or building bridges is one of his daily activities, and as such, a perfect keynote to start our conference. Charalambous, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Nice. So, as a former primary school teacher, I'll be standing, I cannot be sitting. So, hello everyone and welcome to Cyprus. It's indeed a great honor to be standing here in front of you to deliver this keynote speech. So, many thanks to the organizers of the conference, in particular to Professor Fran de Jong for the invitation. Ruben, many thanks for the wonderful introduction. Before I start, I would like to share with you a concern that I had as I was preparing this for this talk. So Dr. McGrady's talked about a dream he had about Messi, but actually I had a nightmare with Messi because I realized that there are two events here taking place in Cyprus today. This is the first time that we have Messi on the island, and I have to compete him. So last night I was having a nightmare that both events were taking place at the same time. Thank God they're not taking place at the same time, so there are people sitting in the room. So thanks for coming here. It's really a great pleasure to be having you here. But I would like to start with what brings us here today, all of us. And I think it's this common interest and this deep interest that we have around practice. So practice is actually the starting and the end point of our work. We research practice and we use this research in order to inform our work around practice. So in this context, what I will be sharing with you is work that I have been doing with colleagues over the past few years on videotaping and analyzing instruction as a means of understanding and enacting ambitious teaching. And I will be defining these terms in a while. But before I start, I would like to say some special notes of thanks to several people who have had an influence on my thinking and work over the past few years. I would like to start with teachers and colleagues at the University of Michigan, where I did my doctoral studies and where I started being interested in analyzing teaching, and especially using videos to develop deeper insights into what teaching really is. I would also like to thank friends and colleagues at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I continue my research and where we had very productive discussions about teaching and learning. And finally, colleagues here at the University of Cyprus for embracing this type of work and for pushing me forward to continue working in this area. And there are so many, so I'm not going to name any of them because I'm afraid that if I start doing so, I'll forget somebody. So many thanks to several colleagues. Also, many thanks to my research teams, ex and current, a group of undergraduate, graduate students, master's and doctoral students for their very hard work during the past 3 years, for their dedication and for really being interested in what we're really researching, that is the work of teachers. actual practice. So without further ado, let's see what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, let me give you an overview of the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about the complexities of teaching, and I'll focus in particular on a type of teaching that is called ambitious teaching. Then I'll structure the rest of the presentation around 4 questions that I think if we use video, we can start developing insights and give answers to those 4 questions. What teaching is and what does it entail? How teaching can contribute to student learning? How ambitious teaching looks like, and whether ambitious teaching can be learned, and if so, how. And I'll reserve the last couple of minutes of this talk to talk about the challenges that inhere in trying to cultivate a culture of learning through analyzing and reflecting upon videotape lessons, especially in an educational context in which we don't have this culture and there is some resistance. So let me start with something that I think more or less we all agree, that teaching is a particularly complex work. But I think not all of us, and when I say us, I mean all the people, will agree with this idea. And especially I'm going to use an idea that was put forth by George Bernard Shaw very early in the 20th century, when he claimed that people who are very capable do not become teachers. If you're very capable, you become something else. And this actually stood in very sharp contrast to what we have known for ages. Back in the ancient years in Greece, Aristotle claimed that in order to be a teacher, you have to know the subject really deeply. You have to know the subject really well. And this idea was reinforced again by Lee Schulman in his ARA presidential talk, when he said, well, those who can't do, but it is those who understand that really teach. And we have to credit Lee Schulman and several other colleagues for reviving the interest around teaching. And actually it is through this work that we came to realize that teaching is a very complex work. And I'm going to list just some of the arguments that support that indeed teaching is very complex. So first of all, unlike other professions that have the luxury to pause for a while and think, teachers, like doctors, do not have this luxury, especially when they interact with kids. So they have to make decisions, and they have to make them rapidly and in situ as they interact with students. Also, Magdalene Lambert and Deborah Ball reminds us that teaching involves a lot of dilemmas, and I'm going to name just one of them. So we have to teach in ways that really respect the integrity of the subject matter, but at the same time, we have to teach in ways that are going to be comprehensible to our students, even to kindergarteners. So that's a big challenge. It's also challenging because it's work that we do with humans, and it is work that is directed toward human improvement. As David Cohen reminds us, it's work that is directly done on other humans in efforts to better their minds, lives, and work. But at the same time, there is a paradox here. No matter how great a teacher you might be, you cannot be successful unless your clients, that is the students, also collaborate with you. So part of the success lies within the students. So the teacher has to motivate the students as well. So this work, this complex work, becomes even more convoluted and even more convoluted endeavor when we think of ambitious teaching. And what is ambitious teaching really? I'm going to use one of the definitions provided by David Cohen, that it is work that we do with students that is intellectually demanding. It attends to students' needs and to their thinking, and it is conducted in thoughtful conversations. Teachers are not doing what I'm doing right now. They're not standing in front of an audience and simply lecture. So for all these reasons, teachers, be they in-service or pre-service teachers, need considerable training in order to be able to enact this type of work. And they need this training because They need to engage all their students in teaching and learning. And they need to know their needs. They need to know their capacities. They need to work at their zone of proximal development, to use the Vygotskian term. So Gregory talked a little bit about developing in-depth knowledge and higher order thinking skills. So this is the type of teaching that we really want, because we want our students to be able to apply what they know to real-life situations. So for students to be able to engage in this intellectually risky work, they have to be in a space that allows them to do so. They have to be in a space where they are willing and motivated to take the risks. And it is the teacher's responsibility actually to create this space. So taking all this into consideration, the question becomes, can we enact this ambitious teaching? And a question for us as scholars and teachers educators, how can we help pre-service and in-service teachers gradually develop the tendency and the capacity to enact this type of work? So what I'm going to do in the rest of this talk, I'm going to answer it by claiming that videos can be really helpful. But before doing so, let me clarify a couple of points. We all agree that teaching is complex, but at the same time, I argue, and I'm not alone in arguing this, that it can be learned. But in order to learn teaching, we first need to understand what teaching is and what it entails. So here comes the use of the videos, and actually the analysis of videotape instruction. So my main thesis, my main argument is that videotape lessons can help us unpack and understand what teaching is. And through this, we can start supporting our pre-service and service teachers learn how to teach. And let me clarify from the beginning. I'm not arguing that videotape analysis is just the only way of doing so, but it is one way of doing so. Nor am I arguing that videos are self-enacting. If this had been the case, we would have placed cameras in all the classrooms around the world and we would have solved the problem. But that's not the case. So I'm going to approach this claim actually by trying to answer 4 questions. What teaching is and what does it entail, how teaching can contribute to student learning, how ambitious teaching looks like, and then whether it can be learned, and if so, in what particular ways. Let me start with the first question. And the truth is that over the past 3 decades, we have a lot of papers written and a lot of presentations given about teaching. But the reality is that, and here I'm using an argument by Grossman and MacDonald, we still lack a comprehensive framework for teaching. I'm not arguing that teaching is the same all around the world, but even so, we do need a framework that is going to help us unpack the different components of teaching, understand these components, and at the same time, develop the language, the grammar, and the lexicon, in Grossman and MacDonald's words, to talk about teaching. So my argument is that analyzing videotape instruction can help us make a first step towards this direction. And by analyzing and decomposing teaching, we can start developing this framework. So what I'm going to do right now is to provide a couple of examples to exemplify this type of work. And actually I'm going to focus on 2 different teaching practices. One that comes from mathematics, using and linking representations, and another that comes from physical education. So using and linking representations in mathematics is a very fundamental role because it enables the teacher to help students start drawing connections. Connections between the symbols and the abstract operations to the manipulatives and the representations that they're using. So while we watch this clip, it's a clip that comes from a 3rd grade US teacher teaching the process of long division. Please take notice of what the teacher is doing while interacting with the kids and the materials. I'm going to show about half of the clip in the interest of time.
Jacob, could you put them in the middle? We're going to show our division as we go. We've been doing our division for a long time, and I don't think we're still getting the point why we're doing this subtracting. Okay, so we have 72, right?
Yeah.
If we wanted to divide 72 by 4, what does that mean? What does that mean? It means how many 4s are in 72, but what else does it mean? Can I do it another way?
Yeah.
How can I do it? But when I'm doing long division, what am I doing? I can make, what I'm finding out is 4 groups, right? All right, so let's find out 4 groups. So, let's see. The girls are 4 girls, right? Jacob, you're not paying attention to me. The girls are 4 girls. So, can you divide these up among the girls, Jacob? Let me see you do that without taking anything apart. One for Natalie. Timmy? Can you give them each a 10? Uh-oh, you can't do it, can you? All right, so how many 10s could you give them, Jacob?
1.
You could give them 1 each. That's why we put a 1 in the answer spot here. I can give them 1 10 each, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Jacob, how many did you give away?
40.
You gave away 40. That's why we put it here. We're going to give it away. We already know there's 1 10 worth, right? Okay. Subtract.
2. And 3.
And how many cubes do you have here?
32.
You have.
Okay, we're going to leave it up to here, and we're going to focus on what the teacher has been doing with her students. So she was very careful in the representation that she picked. So she was using unifix cubes that can be composed and decomposed. That helped her a lot because at the beginning she needed the student to divvy up 10s, group of 10, but then the student needed to decompose the units and start distributing individual cubes. Another thing that she was doing, she was very careful in connecting the symbols with the cubes. And it is through this work that actually we can start linking the representations and help the students develop deeper understanding of the symbols and the mathematical procedures. And another thing that she was doing, she was employing very appropriate mathematical language and notation. So she talked about putting the 1 in the answer spot, but then she clarified that this one is a 10th word. So actually, by analyzing segments like this, we can start unpacking and understanding what this practice of using and linking representations in mathematics involves. And actually, this is what we did with colleagues by analyzing hundreds of such video segments. Let's move to another practice, and here we're going to focus on a totally different subject matter, again to make the case. We're going to focus on the practice of demonstrating a motor skill in physical education. Here we have a 5th grade teacher teaching, a generalist teacher teaching physical education here in Cyprus. Again, we're going to watch a very short segment, and then we're going to talk about what this teacher is actually doing.
Ποιος θα πει από εσάς τι είναι κρύπτο? Όταν μιλούμε για τρίπλα, είτε στο ποδόσφαιρο είτε στην καλαθόσφαιρα, είναι ακριβώς το ίδιο. Παναγιώτη. Είναι καθηγό την μπάλα μόνο με νυχτικό. Ιωάννη. Είναι προχώρο που μπορώ να δημιουργήσω δείξουμε τι θα γίνει τελικά, πώς είμαστε νησιακοί, το δεν προγραμμάζει. Έτσι συγκεκριμένη. Για κοιτάξτε, δεν εκτιμώ την μπάλα της πρόχη με τις άκρες των καυτήρων και όχι ολόκληρη την μπάλα. Η μπάλα δεν πρέπει να φέρει πάνω από τη μέση. Και το ίδιο σημαντικό απ' όλα είναι ότι δεν χρειάζεται να βλέπουμε την μπάλα συνέχεια. Εντάξει, πέστε την τώρα και άλλα την κάτω. Εκτιμούσαμε την μπάλα με αυτή. Μάλιστα, άλλο λάθος που κάνω τώρα. Μαρία. Πολύ ψηλά η μπάλα και τρίτο λάθος τώρα. Κάτω. Δεν θα βλέπουμε ξαναστημίζω λοιπόν σπρώχνω με τις άκρες στο δαχτύλο μου μέχρι και τη μέση μάτια ψηλά.
Okay, so what is this teacher doing right now? So the teacher is showing and telling. He's doing two things at the same time because he knows that both are important. Also, he's emphasizing three learning cues. He identifies certain components from the performance that he wants the students to develop, from the static dribble, and he's emphasizing these learning cues very clearly. At the same time, he's conveying only a small number of learning cues. It's just 3, because he knows that these are 5th graders. So if he started saying more, he could have lost the kids. And at the same time, he's pointing to acceptable and unacceptable performances. So I'm using these clips just a point, just an illustration of how we can start understanding teaching by analyzing videotape records of practice. With that said, let me move to the second question that I want to address today. So let's assume, for the sake of discussion, that we have resolved the thing with teaching, we have developed a framework, we know everything about teaching. Is that enough? Definitely no, because teaching does not happen just in isolation. We need teaching in order to have learning. And although we have a lot of works over the past 3 or 4 decades on teaching and learning, Hibbert and Rose argue, and I agree, that the core question in educational research, what is it about teaching that influences student learning, is still partly addressed. So once we developed these components of teaching, we need to examine if and how these certain components of teaching contribute to student learning. So this is another area where videotape can be really helpful, especially if combined with data on student learning. We can use videotaped lessons of effective and less effective teachers to see how they interact with their kids, to see how they interact with the content. And what is important is that the video is going to allow us multiple views of these lessons. And this is critical, because as I mentioned before, teaching is really complex. So not any single framework, not any single lens or perspective can be used and can give us all this complexity of teaching. We need multiple frameworks, and that's really important. So videotape, as Jennifer Lewis suggests, can help us suspend the action and hold it still long enough to be examined. And it can help us view the lessons again and again and again from different perspectives. This is going to be really important because it can enable iterative analysis. And what I'm going to share with you, a very small example of work that we're doing with colleagues here at the University of Cyprus. We're using this idea of multiple frameworks, and we're using 2 different perspectives. We're focusing both on generic teaching practices, that is practices that cut across different subject matters, and on content-specific practices that are more pertinent to particular subject matters. So let me get to the generic teaching practices. Regardless of whether you teach mathematics, history, language, or science, you need to pose good questions in order to involve your students. You need to provide feedback. You need to orient your students to to what's going to come next and why this is really important. So one of the frameworks that we're using is the dynamic model of educational effectiveness that is a more generic teaching practices framework. At the same time, we're using a content-specific framework that comes from work that we have been doing at the Harvard Graduate School of Education that has to do with content-specific teaching practices. That is, practices that are more relevant to particular subject matters. So in mathematics, we're using and connecting representations. We're using the work that teacher is doing on connecting multiple solutions approaches and several other practices that I don't have the time to discuss. So we're combining both frameworks, and we're doing so for several reasons. First of all, scholars who have worked on either domain have suggested that it's also important to consider the other type of practice. Also, we have recent meta-analyses that have shown that either type of practice is really important. But none of these studies has gone into much depth examining the joint effect of both types of practices. Recently, with colleagues here at the University of Cyprus, we have shown by using TIMSS data that both types of practices are really important and that the combination can help us explain a larger proportion of the variance in student learning compared to the proportion that we could explain when using just one type of practices. And what was even more important was that this proportion is different across countries. We had very interesting stories about how these percentages varied across the different countries. So that's another way where videotape can really help us. And with that said, let me turn to my third question. How does ambitious teaching look like? Well, in order to answer this question, I need to answer several other questions. For example, what does it mean to provide an explanation in any subject matter that is comprehensible to students, but at the same time, it's disciplinarily acceptable? What does it mean to use primary and secondary sources in a history lesson? Or to get to the basics, what does it mean to establish effective classroom routines in order to have smooth transitions? We don't have the time to answer all of them, but my main argument is that videotaping can help us develop libraries of teaching. That is, videotape illustration of how this work looks like. And this is important for at least two reasons. First, it can serve as existence proof. It can show that, this practice can really happen. We can see it in the video. At the same time, it can also help us unpack and understand how it can be done. And in order to prove this, I'm going to use another short video. All of us, I guess, have learned about this rule, about how you can form equivalent fractions in mathematics. In order to form equivalent fractions in mathematics, you need to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. But the question is, why is this the case? And if we understand why this is the case, can we convey this in a way that is going to be understandable to students, but at the same time is not going to make mathematicians like Gregory get mad? So we need to do both things at the same time. So let's see how one of our students, a 5th grade students, really work on this area.
Το πρώτο πλάσμα, Αθανασία μου, κάτσετε πιο σιγαρετε και γιατί κάνουμε φασαρία. Το ένα δεύτερο, είναι δεκανικό πλάσμα. Ρωτώ, παιδιά μου, ξέρετε ότι θέλω να βλέπετε το μάθημα. Είναι δεκανικό πλάσμα το ένα δεύτερο, Αλεξάνδρε μου. Άρα δεν μπορώ να το γράψω σε δεκανικό αλήθεια. Μπορεί να γίνει. Τι θα γίνει? Τι θα γίνει? Ο Αλέξανδρος μιλά. Αγάπη μου, θέλω να μου το κάνεις δεκαδικό πλάσμα πρώτο. Ναι. 5 δέκατα. Θέλω να μου πεις πώς το έκανες 5 δέκατα το ένα δεύτερο. Και τον αριθμητή και τον παρονομαστή επί 5. Άρα ρε παιδιά μου, δέστε, έχω έναν άλλον όνομα του ενός δευτέρου. Στην ουσία εδώ πολλαπλασιάσαμε ένα αριθμητή με το 5 και παρονομαστεί με το 5, με ποιον έχουμε πολλαπλασιάσει. Με ποιον έχουμε πολλαπλασιάσει. Έχουμε πολλαπλασιάσει και αριθμητή και ένα παρονομαστεί με το 5. Στην πραγματικότητα όμως με τι έχουμε πολλαπλασιάσει. Το κλάσμα είναι μεγάλωσε. Άμπρα, το κλάσμα έχει αλλάξει όνομα. Η αξία του είναι η ίδια. Άρα είναι άρα μου. Είναι σαν να πολλαπλασιάσαμε